Christi and Mi Podcast is a program of cdmi.org and Christian Millennial Fellowship. Visit christiandme.org for more information and other episodes of our podcast.
Welcome to the Christi and Mi Podcast, where theology meets the modern world. I'm Christi, your host with a background in church history and technology, and today we're exploring a pressing and often divisive topic: Christians and Earthcare. What responsibility, if any, do believers have toward the environment? Is climate change a theological concern or a distraction? Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Dr. Mi, our resident biblical scholar.
Thank you, Christi. This topic sits at the intersection of biblical interpretation, ethics, and scientific claims. It requires careful reasoning and clarity, especially given the range of views within the Christian community.
Indeed. To help us navigate this complex issue, we've invited two distinguished scholars. First, Dr. Beckwitt, a climate scientist and committed Christian, who argues that climate change is real, urgent, and that Scripture mandates environmental stewardship. And second, Dr. Fossell, a conservative biblical scholar, who contends that climate change is overstated or false, and that God's provision of natural resources, including fossil fuels, reflects divine intention for human flourishing. Thank you both for joining us. Dr. Beckwitt, we'll begin with you. What is your central argument regarding Christians and Earthcare?
Thank you. My position is that climate change is scientifically established and presents an existential risk to ecosystems and human societies. As Christians, we must interpret this reality through Scripture. Genesis 2:15 states that humanity was placed in the garden to work it and keep it. The Hebrew terms abad and shamar imply service and preservation. This establishes a theological mandate. Humans are stewards, not exploiters. Furthermore, Revelation 11:18 speaks of God destroying those who destroy the earth. The context is the return of Christ. And it should be noted that only in our time does humanity have the means to destroy the earth. This suggests divine judgment upon those who degrade creation. Considering current environmental degradation, mass extinction, ecosystem collapse, and climate disruption, this text has particular relevance.
Thank you. Dr. Fossell, your response?
I appreciate the opportunity. My position is grounded in both theological and epistemological concerns. First, the claim that climate change constitutes an existential threat is not universally accepted within the scientific community, and models have often proven unreliable. Second, Scripture clearly grants humanity dominion over creation in Genesis 1:28. The terms subdue, kabosh, and rule, rada, indicate authority. This includes the responsible use of natural resources. Oil, coal, and gas have enabled unprecedented human flourishing, reducing poverty, increasing life expectancy, and supporting technological advancement. To restrict their use based on contested science risks undermining human well-being. Finally, Revelation 11:18 is eschatological and symbolic. It should not be applied directly to modern environmental debates.
Dr. Beckwitt, how do you respond to the claim that climate science is uncertain and that resource use reflects divine provision?
Scientific uncertainty exists in all fields, but the overwhelming consensus among climate scientists is that anthropogenic, that is, human-caused warming, is real and accelerating. Reports from major scientific bodies consistently warn of severe consequences without mitigation. Regarding divine provision, yes, God has given humanity resources, but provision does not imply unlimited exploitation. Scripture consistently links dominion with responsibility. To invoke Genesis 1 without Genesis 2 is cherry-picking scriptures. Both commands hold. Dominion must be interpreted through stewardship. Otherwise, it becomes license for destruction.
If I may respond, this consensus argument is not a theological argument. Christianity does not determine truth by majority opinion. Historically, scientific consensus has been wrong. Moreover, human innovation has repeatedly solved environmental challenges. Alarmism can lead to harmful policies, particularly for developing nations that depend on affordable energy.
If I may interject, both of you are raising important hermeneutical questions. The tension between Genesis 1:28 and Genesis 2:15 is well recognized in biblical scholarship. The former emphasizes authority, the latter, responsibility. The question is not which text is correct, but how they are integrated. Historically, many theologians, such as Augustine and later Reformation thinkers, understood dominion as ordered stewardship, not autonomous exploitation. Regarding Revelation 11:18, the Greek term G can refer both to the physical earth and its inhabitants. While the text is apocalyptic, it reflects a moral principle. God judges destructive behavior. Whether this applies directly to environmental degradation remains debated, but the ethical trajectory is clear.
Let's move then to ethical implications. What should Christians do? Dr. Beckwitt?
Christians should lead in environmental responsibility. This includes reducing carbon emissions, supporting sustainable practices, and advocating for policies that protect ecosystems. Importantly, this is not merely political, it is moral. Environmental degradation disproportionately affects the poor, which raises issues of justice. If we accept that human activity contributes to ecological harm, then inaction becomes ethically problematic.
Dr. Fossell?
Christians should prioritize human flourishing. Environmental care is important, but it must not come at the expense of economic stability or access to energy. We should be cautious about adopting policies driven by fear rather than balanced judgment. Technological innovation, not restriction, has historically addressed environmental concerns. Additionally, we must avoid conflating environmentalism with biblical doctrine. Scripture does not command carbon reduction targets.
I'd like each of you to pose one question to the other.
Dr. Fossell, if scientific evidence continues to accumulate showing severe environmental harm caused by human activity, at what point would you reconsider your position?
If there were clear, empirically verifiable, and consistently accurate predictive models demonstrating catastrophic outcomes directly attributable to human activity, I would reassess. My concern is that such certainty has not been achieved. My question to you: how do you prevent environmental stewardship from becoming an ideological substitute for the gospel?
By maintaining theological priorities. Stewardship is not salvific, it is responsive. It flows from obedience to God, not as a replacement for the gospel, but as an expression of it.
This discussion highlights a broader issue: the integration of general revelation, science, and special revelation, Scripture. Christians historically have affirmed both, but tensions arise when interpretations appear to conflict. The challenge is to avoid reductionism, either dismissing scientific findings outright or subordinating theology to contemporary consensus. The doctrine of creation affirms that the material world has value. The doctrine of stewardship affirms responsibility. The extent and application of that responsibility remain matters of ongoing debate.
Dr. Beckwitt, you referenced scientific consensus. Could you expand on the major institutional findings that inform your position?
Certainly. The most authoritative body synthesizing climate science globally is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, commonly known as the IPCC. It is important to note that the IPCC does not conduct original research. Rather, it evaluates and synthesizes thousands of peer-reviewed studies. Its conclusions are widely regarded as conservative, not alarmist. This is due to its consensus-based methodology, which requires agreement among scientists and government representatives from diverse geopolitical contexts. As a result, its projections often represent the lower bound of risk rather than the upper bound. The IPCC has concluded, with very high confidence, that human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels, are the dominant cause of observed warming since the mid-20th century. It further warns that continued emissions will lead to increasingly severe impacts: intensified heat waves, sea level rise, agricultural disruption, and biodiversity collapse. However, even these warnings may underestimate the severity of the situation. For example, the work of James Hansen, one of the earliest scientists to testify before the U.S. Congress on global warming, suggests that climate sensitivity and feedback mechanisms may be stronger than the IPCC models account for. Hansen's more recent research indicates that we may be approaching critical tipping points, such as ice sheet destabilization, that could lead to rapid and irreversible changes. In other words, the situation may be progressing faster and with greater intensity than even the IPCC's conservative projections suggest.
Dr. Fossell, how do you respond to this expanded scientific case?
I appreciate the detail, but several concerns remain. First, while the IPCC is influential, it is not infallible. Its reports are shaped not only by scientific data, but also by political negotiation. Governments have a role in approving summary statements, which raises questions about objectivity. Second, the appeal to authority, even a scientific authority, does not resolve epistemological uncertainty. Science is a dynamic process. Predictions, especially those involving complex systems like climate, are inherently uncertain. Third, with respect to Dr. Hansen's work, it represents one perspective within a broader scientific discourse. The fact that his conclusions exceed those of the IPCC illustrates precisely my concern. There is no unified scientific position on the magnitude of risk. Finally, from a theological standpoint, we must be cautious about framing environmental concerns in apocalyptic terms. Scripture already provides an eschatological framework. Human projections of catastrophe should not be conflated with divine revelation.
If I may respond, while it is true that science evolves, the degree of agreement among climate scientists on the basic mechanisms of climate change is extraordinarily high. The uncertainties that remain pertain primarily to how severe the impacts will be, not whether they will occur. Regarding the IPCC's political dimension, yes, summaries are reviewed by governments, but the underlying scientific reports remain independent and are authored by experts. If anything, this process tends to dilute more urgent conclusions rather than exaggerate them. As for Dr. Hansen, he is a recognized world-class expert. His work is significant precisely because it highlights potential underestimation of risk. And he is not the only climate scientist raising the issue of IPCC underestimation. There are many. Scientific caution should not be mistaken for reassurance. From a theological perspective, acknowledging environmental risk is not equivalent to constructing an alternative eschatology. It is an application of prudence. If human actions are contributing to large-scale harm, then moral responsibility follows.
This raises an important hermeneutical issue. The doctrine of providence affirms that God sustains creation, yet Scripture also records instances where human actions lead to ecological consequences. For example, prophetic literature frequently links moral failure with environmental degradation, droughts, famine, and land desolation. While these texts operate within a covenantal framework specific to ancient Israel, they demonstrate a theological principle. Human behavior can have material consequences. At the same time, eschatological passages such as Romans 8 depict creation as groaning, awaiting redemption. This suggests that creation itself participates in the broader narrative of fall and restoration. The question, then, is whether modern environmental degradation should be interpreted within this theological framework, and if so, how directly.
Let's return to Genesis. Dr. Fossell, how do you interpret dominion in light of contemporary environmental concerns?
Dominion must be understood as responsible governance, but it does not preclude resource utilization. Humanity's use of fossil fuels has brought undeniable benefits: industrial development, medical advancements, and global connectivity. To restrict these resources based on uncertain projections risks reversing these gains. Furthermore, Scripture does not present nature as intrinsically fragile. It is sustained by divine providence. There is also a danger of elevating environmental preservation to a quasi-sacred status, which can distort theological priorities.
I agree that dominion includes responsible use, but the key term is responsible. If a particular mode of resource use results in large-scale harm, rising sea levels displacing populations, crop failures leading to famine, chaotic and severe weather patterns, then continuing that practice without modification is not responsible stewardship. The benefits of fossil fuels are real, but so are their costs. The question is not whether we should use resources, but which, how, and to what extent. China, which does not have its own fossil fuel deposits, has put a lot of effort into renewable energy technology. It is now the world's leader and is projected to run the entire country on renewable energy within 10 years, as well as creating substantial wealth exporting their renewable technology. So, while the West, especially America, creates policy based on fossil fuel company needs, reinforced by conservative politicians who receive significant campaign funds from them, China is leaving the West in the dust technologically. The West is pursuing short-term fossil fuel profits over wise strategic planning based on the best science.
Let's consider the global dimension. How does this issue affect different populations?
Climate change disproportionately affects vulnerable populations, those with the least capacity to adapt. This includes low-income communities and developing nations. From a biblical perspective, this raises issues of justice. Scripture repeatedly calls for the protection of the vulnerable. If our actions contribute to conditions that harm them, then this is not merely an environmental issue, it is a moral one.
I would caution against assuming a direct causal link between emissions and specific instances of suffering. Global poverty and instability have multiple causes: political, economic, and social. Moreover, access to affordable energy is itself a critical factor in alleviating poverty. Restricting fossil fuels may inadvertently harm the very populations we seek to help.
Actually, the opposite is the case. Many poor countries have leapfrogged over fossil fuel-based energy and now generate nearly 100% of their electricity from renewables, primarily hydropower, geothermal, and solar. Examples include Albania, Bhutan, Nepal, Paraguay, Ethiopia, and the DRC, with many more to follow.
Let's continue the direct exchange.
My question: do you believe that climate change constitutes the most urgent moral issue facing Christians today?
Not in isolation. However, it intersects with multiple moral domains: justice, stewardship, and care for neighbor. Its scale and potential irreversibility make it uniquely significant among contemporary issues.
It may be helpful to frame this discussion within a broader theological synthesis. 3 principles emerge. 1. Creation is good. The material world is affirmed as part of God's good creation. 2. Human responsibility. Humanity is entrusted with stewardship, which includes both use and preservation. 3. Moral accountability. Scripture affirms that human actions have consequences, both spiritual and material. The difficulty lies in applying these principles to complex modern phenomena such as climate change, where scientific interpretation and policy implications remain contested.
This extended discussion has revealed both the depth of disagreement and the shared commitment to engaging Scripture seriously. Dr. Beckwitt has emphasized the weight of scientific evidence, including the conservative assessments of the IPCC and the more urgent warnings of Dr. James Hansen and others, arguing that stewardship demands action. Dr. Fossell has raised critical concerns about scientific uncertainty, theological priorities, and the potential consequences of policy decisions. Dr. Mi has reminded us that the integration of Scripture and science requires careful interpretation and humility. As always, we encourage our listeners to examine both the biblical texts and the empirical evidence with diligence and discernment. Thank you to our guests for a substantive and respectful dialogue.
Thank you.
This has been the Christi and Mi Podcast. Until next time, seek truth, pursue wisdom, and remain grounded in faith.
The Christi and Mi Podcast is a program of CDMI.org and Christian Millennial Fellowship. Visit christiandme.org for more information and other episodes of our podcast.